My parents spread rumors that I invented a fiancé, barred me from bringing him to my cousin's engagement, and used my money to help pay for the event. He showed up anyway, and I drew a line that split my family but finally gave me peace. Bittersweet, but I got my life back. The lawn was too perfect. The grass was that engineered shade of green that belongs in magazines and on golf courses, not behind my aunt's house, not under my shoes that still had a little dried city grit in the treads. Strings of lights clung to the maple branches like they knew where to hang themselves, and the tent billowed in the late afternoon breeze like it was breathing. I stood near the drinks table and pretended to fuss with the wedge of lime in my seltzer. The DJ was playing a playlist that sounded like it was built by committee. My Aunt Renee waved at me the way people wave at the last kid to get picked for dodgeball, compassionate, but relieved it isn't them. Somewhere behind me, my mother was laughing. It was that laugh she saves for a crowd, sharp and a shade too loud, the kind that cuts the air. I heard my father say, "Maybe he's invisible, and that's why she keeps bumping into chairs." Aunt snorted. Someone said, "Bless her heart," and someone else, "Always the drama." I didn't turn around. If I looked, I might lock eyes with my mother and not know what to do with my face. My phone buzzed. Rowan, 2 blocks away. You okay? I stared at the message. He'd offered not to come. He'd said, "We don't have to go anywhere they don't want us." I'd said I was tired of leaving quietly. I typed, "I'm here. It's what we expected. Come anyway if you want the full experience." He sent back a thumbs up and a red heart, understated, like we agreed on when things were hard. I put the phone back in my bag and focused on the ice melting in the seltzer, the way the condensation tracked down like a tiny storm on glass. Tessa floated past in a pale gold dress, a bottle of champagne cradled in her arm like it might cry if she held it wrong. She brushed my arm and said, "You okay?" quietly, as if checking on a bird that hit a window. I nodded. "You look beautiful," I said, because that was true. She smiled like it pained her, and then she was swallowed by a knot of people with opinions on canapes. I stared out at the hydrangeas. My heart was beating fast in my throat, doing that old trick of trying to climb out of me. My mother's laughter rose again. "Imaginary," she said, like a punchline she bought wholesale. "That girl could sell ice to a polar bear," my father said, and glasses clinked. I thought about turning around and saying he exists. I thought about listing the facts like a police report. "His name is Rowan, he's a mechanical engineer. He makes better pancakes than you, Dad, and he cries at videos of people rescuing pigs." Instead, I adjusted my dress and watched the driveway, and when the black sedan pulled up and he stepped out, the whole lawn seemed to tilt, just a little, as if the evening was making room for him. Before it broke, I knew how to look like a good daughter. It's a skill that gets taught at the table, between meatloaf and the stories your parents tell about themselves like they're polishing antiques. I'm the younger one. My brother, Eli, was born 6 minutes before midnight and therefore a different zodiac sign than me, a detail my mother loved to mention when explaining his mercurial moods. Eli was a comet in our house. People stopped and tilted their heads back for him. Teachers made exception plans. He got the new sneakers. My father's voice softened when he said, "That's my boy," like he'd grown a new heart just for that sentence. When I was 6, I learned to make my own cereal so I wouldn't wake anyone. By 12, I had the under-sink plumbing under control. By 14, I could anticipate the question before it was asked. There was always something to fix, starting with not making trouble. My mother, Janice, kept our calendar like a general. She wrote birthdays and dental cleanings and which aunt was currently not speaking to which cousin. She had this way of telling stories about me that turned me into a quirky side character in the movie of her life. Lena was always a bookworm, she'd say to anyone new, always with her head somewhere else. God knows where. She'd laugh. People always laughed with her. It felt easier than not. My father, Marco, had the kind of charm that makes waiters give you extra bread. He sold insurance and talked about it like he was translating the world's ugliness into spreadsheets, so it wouldn't touch us. He lived on jokes. Serious as a heart attack. He'd say to me when I asked about money, and then he'd laugh and put a hand on my shoulder like we'd made a deal. We were never poor, but you could always hear the money in the walls. Morning started with the mail, and the mail was always bills, even if they were just envelopes advertising credit cards. Money gets in your drinking water. It changes the taste. By high school, Eli's mistakes landed like feathers and mine sounded like plate shattering. He was brilliant at chasing potential. He'd start a band, a business, a certification. He learned just enough to become interesting and bored. He left unpaid tabs that became stories that began with "you wouldn't believe" and ended with laughter. I learned to fill in gaps, pressed down like grout. When I got into art school, the expensive one with the glossy brochure and the students who wore courage like cologne, my mother smiled and said we should frame the letter. My father hugged me and said, "We'll see." He was tired that day, and Eli was in a mess with a friend and a car, and a scratch on a bumper that was suddenly a lawsuit. On the kitchen counter, a brochure for a cheaper program at the community college waited, its edges already curled from being picked up and put down by a lot of hands. The day I changed my mind about art school, my mother made a pot roast, and my father uncorked a bottle of wine we were saving for a good reason. "This is a good reason," he said. "You'll be close to home," my mother said, touching my cheek with a single finger. It lasted a second, that finger on my face. It lasted for years. Working part-time at the hardware store my uncle owned turned into full-time work that turned into managing the back office and fixing whatever broke. I coached Eli through filling out forms. I sat with my grandmother in waiting rooms that smelled like antiseptic and lemon. I learned the full middle names of all the receptionists. I went home to my little apartment, and the plant in the corner that was always reaching for light, it never quite got. I met Rowan on a Tuesday. I was 28, and my lower back had started talking to me in a voice I cannot describe to someone who hasn't heard their own spine complain. Physical therapy took place in a room with terrible lighting and a poster illustrating muscles with names that sounded like poets. Rowan was there because a drunk driver had glanced him off his motorcycle like he was a smudge on a photograph. His left knee had that flattened look that says it knows too much about impact physics. He was quiet the way a person is quiet when they've survived something loud. He watched. He listened. He laughed, not the kind of laugh that makes everyone look, but the kind that makes you feel like you'd like to be the reason it happens again. He had hands like a person who likes to build things. He asked the PT about how her daughter was doing in college. When we bumped into each other at the water fountain, he said, "How's your back?" Like he actually wanted to know. We started taking walks after sessions, mostly because walking makes the pain not as sharp and because talking while moving makes talking easier. He told me about the design firm where he worked and the ugly chair he loved in his apartment and the way his mother used to build model airplanes with him. I told him about the sound of money in the walls, about Eli, about the way my mother's stories grew claws without her noticing. He met my friends before he met my family. They adored him in that unassuming way that meant they trusted him when they weren't laughing. A friend's toddler fell asleep on his shoulder at a barbecue, and the world started making more sense. I didn't tell my parents right away. There is a space between new and real where you protect things like seedlings under a wire cage to keep out the rabbits. Also, I had learned that certain information in my family didn't belong to me once I said it out loud. It turned into marbles in other people's mouths. It became something to pass around. I mentioned him to my mother in a sentence about my week, like an experiment. "I met someone," I said, calm. She smiled like I'd set down a glowing box and told her it wasn't ticking. "That's sweet," she said. "What does he do?" "Engineering," I said. "That's practical," she said, a word she reserved for things she approved of. "Have him over." "We're taking it slow," I said. "I'll let you know." Her eyes narrowed the way they did when she was deciding if I was a child or an adult. She said, and I could feel it, the story trying to grow around me like ivy. Before it broke, there was a weekend where Eli borrowed my car, and something was wrong with the oil when he brought it back. There was a Tuesday when my father had chest tightness and I left work early, and we sat at the urgent care while he made jokes at the nurse, and the nurse did not laugh. There were bills. There were late nights where I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and my coffee, and a spreadsheet I built myself because it made me feel like I could control something if I had columns. And there was me, A person who had learned to be very, very quiet unless it was about someone else, in which case I could be loud as a megaphone. Pressure doesn't announce itself. It just adds a tiny bit, and then another, and then a little more, and then one day you're a bridge you never knew you were, and your legs are shaking and trucks keep crossing because that's what they've always done. Spring the year of the engagement, my father's heart tried to get his attention and failed. They called it a mild heart attack because humans name things in ways that let us pretend we have control. He called it a blip. He texted me a hospital photo, smiling like he'd just run a 5K, his hospital bracelet like a festival wristband. When I walked into his room, he was charming a nurse half his age with a story about the time he tried to teach my mother to parallel park. The bills were immediate and confusing. Insurance numbers sat on a beige folder like a puzzle I didn't want to solve anymore. My mother's voice on the phone was flint hitting metal. "We're fine," she said, and then, "It's a lot, Lena." Silence. Just a little. Just until the claim is processed. I had $7,450 in a savings account named something small for the emergency that would be mine someday and not someone else's. I had $2,300 in another account practically reserved for a new mattress because my spine was a cranky neighbor who complained about noise. I used to joke about my emergency fund. When the emergency knocked, it didn't care it wasn't mine. "We need $4,000 for the out-of-network cardiologist," my mother said, brisk. "They said we could wait on some of it, but you know how these places are." "I can send 3, I said, because the math arrived as fast as the guilt. I said I'd transfer it. She said, "Thank you," like I had done something that solved a puzzle in her head, where I am a certain kind of daughter. Rowan watched me that night with that steady gaze that makes you feel watched in the way you wished your parents watched you when you were little. "You don't have to explain," he said. "I will anyway," I said, because my bones are built of explanations. "He's my father." He nodded. "Are his pockets your pockets?" he asked, and he wasn't being clever. He was being careful. I sent the money. I bought my father a robe with a zipper, because buttons are annoying in recovery. I set reminders to call and ask about his blood pressure and whether he was walking after dinner. I became the person who knew which cardiologist took which insurance. Eli texted me a heart and then a photo of a motorcycle he wanted to buy because life is short. He asked me to co-sign. When I didn't answer immediately, he texted, "Just for the discount. NBD." When I said no, my mother called and spoke in a voice that meant, "Are you enjoying being the villain?" "He's your brother," she said. I said I can't. I said, and my voice did that thing where it tries to be steel and sounds like glass. In May, I went to my parents' house to help set up a printer. The kitchen was a lit-up showroom of counters my mother kept clean with devotion. There was a binder on the table with a list printed inside, Tessa's engagement. My mother loves lists like they love her back. I flipped the page. Venue, catering, band, florist. They were hosting the party in Aunt Renee's backyard to save money, but you still need things, my mother said. "Do you need a hand?" I asked. It is reflex, offering like that. "Oh, sweetheart," she said. "We've got it." On the way to the bathroom, my eyes did that scanning thing they do around numbers. There was a receipt on the hall table, peeking from an envelope. Harborview Events, deposit, $2,000. Paid with card ending in 1419. My stomach lifted like a car cresting a hill, and then dropped. My card ends in 1419. I stared at the digits until they blurred. They looked like a language that finally learned how to hurt me out loud. I walked back into the kitchen and said, "Mom." "What?" she said, cheerful as a knife. "You used my card."
She didn't look at me.
"Marco," she said to my father, "your daughter thinks we committed a crime." My father lifted his eyes from the laptop. "What's that?" I held up the receipt. My hand shook a little.
"This."
"You used my card." He rubbed his chin. "They had it on file from the hospital when we called to ask about their overflow tent," he said, breezy. "It solved 2 problems. "It solved your problem," I said. When I hear myself angry, it always sounds like a performance. "It's family money," my mother said, as if she were explaining a mortgage to a child. "We'll square up once the insurance settles and your father goes back to work." "It's a party deposit," I said, and my voice broke on the last word, the party getting stuck in my teeth. "It's for Tessa," my mother said, as if Tessa were a sacrament. "Don't be petty, Lena. And put your face away. You look mean when you do that with your mouth." My father stood up and brushed imaginary crumbs from his shirt. "We did what needed to be done," he said. He walked past me and put the receipt back where I found it. "You'll get it back," he said, like a promise he could afford to make, because he was never the one listening for the money in the walls. At home, I sat on the edge of my bathtub and let my face do whatever my mother hates. Rowan handed me a towel, because sometimes holding something soft is a miracle. "That's theft," he said. His voice was flat. I had never heard him say the word theft in a way that suggested my parents might be the villains. "It's family," I said, because I was trained. "Family doesn't make you the ATM, because you're the quiet one," he said. He sat on the floor beside the tub and leaned his head on my knee. "What do you want to do?" I called my mother and told her that I needed them to pay me back by the end of the week. I said I would be calling the bank to put a fraud alert on my card. I said I wasn't going to play phone tag with insurance representatives for them anymore. I said it calmly, like I had practiced. She went humid. "Are you seriously threatening us over a misunderstanding?" she asked. "You're going to do this because of a little number on a slip of paper? You decline Eli, and now this. What kind of sister? What kind of daughter does that make you?" "One who is tired," I said. She hung up. My phone buzzed 40 seconds later. A screenshot from Eli popped up in the family group chat, my words cut and pasted by my mother. "I need you to pay me back by the end of the week. Fraud alert. Not doing calls with insurance." Aunt Renee chimed in. "Is she okay? Uncle Paul. That girl thinks she's a banker." That is how rumors begin, with selective copy-paste. In June, the engagement invitation arrived. Cream cardstock, embossed names, RSVP linked to a website with a photo of Tessa and Evan laughing in a sun-dappled field. In smaller print, for planning purposes, NoPlusOnes unless engaged or married. "Thank you for understanding." I stared at it and tried to tell myself this was reasonable, a budget thing. That was the story. The subtext, sent by my mother 10 minutes later, was not subtle. "You're going?" she asked in a text. "Yes," I replied. "Please RSVP for one," she said. "We're keeping it intimate."
We.
I wrote back. "Renee and me," she replied. "Also, it's not appropriate for you to bring someone we haven't met." Rowan and I had been together a year by then. He had met my friends, my neighbors, the barista who called everyone darling but meant it with him. He had met my back at its worst and my laughing at its best. He had not met my parents, because my parents turned information into gossip like straw into something more expensive for a few minutes before it fell apart in the rain. I called Tessa. "Do you not want me to bring someone?" I asked, and it came out too soft. There was a pause. "I'm staying out of your mom's thing," she said. "You know how she is." "It's your party," I said. "Yeah," she said, and I heard the helplessness in it, like a penny falling down a well. "Your mom is paying for a lot. She has thoughts." "She used my card for the deposit," I said, quiet. "What?" Tessa asked, but like it was a word she wasn't allowed to know the meaning of. "I didn't know that." "I thought." "I know what you thought," I said, and I kept my voice gentle because if I stopped being gentle, I was afraid I would shatter and make a mess of glass that would cut whatever stepped in it. The week before the party, I dropped off a gift at my parents' house, so I would have one less excuse to visit. I set it on the table and was turning to leave when I caught them on the back deck. My mother with a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, my father with that beer he only buys when people he wants to impress are coming over. "I told Renee we should put NoPlusOnes in bold for Lena," my mother said, amused. "You know she says she has a fiancé now." My father laughed like someone had slipped him the punchline early. "She'll show up with a cardboard cutout from the mall," he said. "Imaginary," my mother said, delighted with herself for landing on the word. Honestly, at least Eli admits when he needs help. Lena just sits alone and becomes creative. "Maybe she'll bring that guy from the therapy place," my father said. "What was his name?" "Rain." "Rowan," I said, because I'd come outside without meaning to. My voice surprised me, a rabbit stepping into a field full of hawks. They both turned. The look that crossed my mother's face was a mirror held up to a person who had been caught mid-story. "Lena," she said, 1,000 excuses loading in her throat. My father smiled. "Honey," he said, paternal and slow. "We're just teasing. The kid gloves have to come off eventually." "Let me be clear," I said. "You used my card. You told me I made up a person I love, and you will not let me bring him to a party you partly paid for with my money. Am I understanding this?" My mother sipped her wine. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "If he's real, where is he? Does he have his own apartment?" My father asked, joking. "Or does he live in the cloud?" I stared at them. The sound of the street outside was a comfort, cars with places to be. I set my palms on the deck railing. It was warm from the sun. "I'll see you at the party," I said. "And I'm not coming alone." "You're not invited with a +1, my mother said. "You'll embarrass me." "I'm not responsible for that," I said. She laughed. "That's an interesting perspective," she said. By the time I got back to my car, my whole body felt like a radio tuned to static. I sat in the driver's seat and pressed my forehead to the steering wheel. Rowan called. "I can hear your breathing," he said, quiet. "I'm in my kitchen making pasta and my hands are covered in flour and I can hear your breathing." I told him. He listened the way he listens, eyes on me even when he isn't in the room. He said, "We can skip it. We can take a train to anywhere else and eat fries." "I have to go," I said. "It's Tessa. I have to see who she'll be." "What do you want to do?" he asked again, like a hand held out. "I want to go," I said. "And I want you to come, but come later. I want to make sure I show up, because I said I would. And then I want you there." "Okay," he said. "Then I'll wear the navy suit you like." "You know the one," I said, and he laughed. It felt like oxygen. I wrote an email to my bank. I used phrases like unauthorized charge and dispute and lien. I attached the image of the receipt from Harborview events. I typed a timeline. It made me feel steady to have bullets and dates and blocks of text that were about receipts and not my heart. I printed the email. I printed the reply from the bank that said, "We're looking into it." I printed the statement with the charge circled. I put them in an envelope and the envelope in my bag because I know my mother. I know the way she can call reality a misunderstanding until you share a wall with her version of it. I also picked up a small gift for Tessa and Evan, an envelope with a gift certificate to a bed and breakfast 2 hours away, a place Rowan and I had stayed once with mismatched mugs and a porch swing, and a cat that visited every morning like a neighbor. I wrote them a note. "May you have a future with a lot of mornings that feel like Sunday." On my way to the engagement, I stopped at a florist. I bought a small bouquet for myself. It was a ridiculous thing to do, but I wanted to hold something that wasn't an envelope full of evidence. The woman at the counter said, "Who is it for?" "Me," I said, and her face softened just a fraction. "Good," she said. At the edge of the lawn, the string lights made their own constellations. Aunt Renee's backyard looked like a catalog with a backstory. There were wooden signs with scripted words. There were mason jars with candles. There was a bar with one bartender who had seen too many of my family's weddings and wakes and wore the knowledge like a hat. I took my place by the seltzer. People approached with versions of the same greeting. "There she is," someone said, as if I'd been lost. "You look skinny," someone else said, like a diagnosis. Aunt Barbara hugged me and whispered, "You should have told your mother sooner," and I didn't know which should have she meant. I held my bouquet like a shield. My mother's gaze slid over me and landed somewhere safer. She wore a dress the color of the inside of seashells, demure and expensive. My father's face was flushed the way it gets when he's both excited and drinking. The DJ attempted an upbeat transition. That is when I heard it. A cousin, loud enough to carry. "Did you meet Lena's fiancé?" Laughter like a pack of hyenas finding something they can chew without running. "She's dating a hologram," my father said, and it was such a clean line, so rehearsed, that I knew he'd tried it out already in other rooms. "What's his name?" my mother asked, winking at Aunt Barbara the way a person does when they are about to take a bow. "Narnia." "You know it's Rowan," I said, turning. My voice sounded like a bell you don't ring unless there is a fire. My mother's eyes met mine. "We're joking, sweetheart," she said and patted the air near me. "Stop calling me sweetheart like I'm a child you can pat into silence," I said. People around us sensed the temperature change. Heads turned. Conversations hushed. The lights hummed. My father lifted his chin. "You brought your documents?" he asked, smiling at his own wit, because he'd seen me put the envelope in my bag when I arrived. "Actually," I said, and my hands were steady around the bouquet. "Yes." There is a version of this story where I flipped a table. People love those. They are satisfying in a way that real life rarely is. I did not flip a table. I put the bouquet down. I took the envelope out of my bag and held it down by my side like I was at an awards show no one asked me to present at. "You put the deposit on my card," I said, calm. "You can call that family money. My bank calls it an unauthorized charge." I put the envelope on the drinks table because the drinks table was flat and nearby. "I would like to be paid back. Today works." Aunt Renee stepped forward, eyes wide. "Lena," she said, warning built into my name. Tessa slipped through the crowd and stopped, her face open and stricken. Evan hovered behind her, his hands at his sides like he was ready to catch something. "You are ruining this," my mother said, which was always the real sin, ruining a picture she was still setting up. "You ruined it when you told everyone we were making up a person," I said, and I was tired, and the tiredness made my sentences shorter and truer. "He's a person. He has a scar on his knee that looks like an island, and he cries at those rescue videos, and he builds me shelves that make my tiny apartment look like magic. He exists. You just didn't want to meet him if you couldn't control the story." Something shifted in my mother's face. Anger, then calculation. She glanced around. She wanted an audience for whatever was next. "Lena," my father said, "we can talk about this later. Don't be tacky." "Tacky is using someone's money and then calling her crazy," I said. It came out quiet. It came out like a knife that has been sharpened by being pulled too many times across a stone. "Okay," a voice said. "This is derailing fast." Rowan stepped up beside me like he'd been designed to arrive exactly then. He wore the navy suit, the one with the single stitch near the shoulder where the tailor's hand had been careful. He stood at an angle that said he was with me and also did not intend to fight anyone. He has a way of standing that makes people feel the need to recalibrate their own posture. He smiled at Tessa first. "You look radiant," he said. She blinked. My mother gasped in a way I had only ever heard in movies. My father's mouth opened. Eli, who had shaved but left the 2-day shadow because it looks like the edge of a risk, stared and then looked at me with a combination of "I'll never admit I'm surprised" and "I just saw a ghost." "Hi," Rowan said to my parents, calm. "We haven't met. I'm Rowan. I work with machines and try to be a decent person. Please don't call me imaginary." A laugh cracked through the crowd, involuntary. It wasn't cruel. It was relief, like when a tension breaks you didn't know you were holding in your shoulders. My mother recovered first. "Well," she said, extending her hand like a queen offering a ring to be kissed. "I wish Lena had told us. We could have invited you properly." "We were told there were no +1s," Rowan said, taking her hand because he is polite, always, until he isn't. He looked at my father. "I'm also here because the woman I love was humiliated here a minute ago by the people who are supposed to guard her from the world's worst. That makes me unhappy." My father laughed the laugh that had gotten him out of so many parking tickets. "We're jokers," he said. "It's family." "I understand that," Rowan said. "I also understand bank statements." He nodded at the envelope. "I made copies for you. And I've already contacted the bank to freeze her card, Marco, so if you've got any more ideas about family money, please don't." My father's face changed so fast I watched the charm slide off like a mask. "Who do you think you are?" he asked, his voice small and mean. "I'm the person who'll stand between your daughter and your worst instincts," Rowan said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't swagger. He said it like he'd made a decision a long time ago and was only now informing everyone. "You don't tell me about my instincts," my mother said, but it came out less certain than she meant it to. "Mom," Tessa said, stepping forward. "Stop." "Not your business," Aunt Renee said, but you could tell she wished she had said it 15 minutes earlier, before the ground moved under us. People around us did that back-away thing that looks like a tide. The DJ turned down the music, as if noise might add kindling to the fire. A toddler cried because toddlers are honest like that. "Lena," my father said, reaching for the familiar. "We'll fix it. Let's not ruin your cousin's day." "Then pay me back," I said. "And stop telling people I am a liar." Eli finally moved his face into the conversation. "You told people you're engaged," he said to me, equal parts accusation and awe that I had kept anything from him. "I told Mom I've been seeing someone I love," I said. "I told you nothing because you lose things." A few people coughed and hid smiles. He looked wounded for a second, which made me want to apologize because I am trained to apologize for wounding anyone, even when bleeding. "Let me be clear," Rowan said, stepping slightly in front of me now, because posture is its own language. "We aren't here to ruin anything. We want to give Tessa and Evan our gift and then be boring guests who eat shrimp and leave before dessert because Lena's back hurts after 9. People chuckled because it was mundane and honest, and it pulled us back to earth. Rowan handed our card to Tessa. She looked at us like we'd just thrown a rope to someone in water. She took it. Evan swallowed hard. "Thank you," he said, and his voice cracked in a way that made me like him more. My mother looked everybody over and chose a new hill. "You made a scene," she said to me, voice trembling with fury she would later call hurt. "I responded to one," I said. "And this is the last time I'll respond to it like this." "What does that mean?" my father asked, belligerent. "It means," I said, turning to look at them. All of them. Faces that had been my weather my whole life. "I won't carry the private parts of your chaos anymore. If you involve me, I will invite witnesses. If you take my money, I'll involve the bank. If you humiliate me, I will call it what it is out loud. I'm done being loyal to stories that require me to disappear." A breeze moved through the maple leaves. You could hear the nylon tent skin ripple. Someone coughed into a napkin. "Life is always happening around your worst moments, which is maybe a mercy." My mother blinked. My father's eyes were wet, but not in the way you want to see on a father's face. He looked trapped, like a boy who got caught in a lie and doesn't know how to get back out. "Fine," he said. "We'll settle up. For the record, I hate the way you talk to us." "For the record," I said, "me too." We stayed an hour. We hugged the cousins we actually like. We congratulated Evan's parents. We ate meatballs on sticks and something on toast that tasted like the chef had had a fight with olive oil. Rowan held my hand in that way people hold hands when they need a reminder that their hand ends somewhere. On our way out, my mother caught my elbow. She leaned in like she was going to kiss my cheek and whispered, "You will regret this." I turned and met her eyes. "I already regret 1,000 silent things," I said. "This won't be one of them." In the car, I cried until my mascara made tiny rivers down my face and Rowan handed me napkins from the glove box that smelled like lemon and paper. We drove in silence for a while, the kind of silence that only happens with someone who knows the shape of your quiet. He pulled into a drive-thru and ordered fries and a milkshake because he knows the way my body calms when it gets salt and sugar. "You did good," he said, breaking a fry in half like he was distributing communion, "but we don't use that word." He fed me the smaller half. "You were a person with edges." "My mother's going to hate you," I said, half laughing. "She already does," he said, and he smiled like he could bear it. Back in my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and went straight to the sink to wash my hands because touching people makes me aware of all the skin in the room. I stared at the water running over my knuckles. The apartment smelled like basil because there was a plant near the window trying to thrive with me. My phone buzzed. Messages lined up like bad soldiers. My mother, "You are out of control." My father, "We'll send a check." Aunt Renee, "You made your point." Eli, "Dude, you got us." A cousin, "Proud of you." Another cousin, "Your boyfriend is hot." Tessa, "I'm sorry. I owe you more than an apology." I set the phone face down and went to my little table and took out my notebook. I wrote down the names of the people who texted. It is a practice my therapist taught me. Evidence of how people behave when it counts. Rowan sat beside me and put his hand over mine. Tomorrow, he said. Let's sleep tonight. The check arrived 2 days later. It was for $2,000, the exact deposit amount. No note. No apology. It felt like hush money. I deposited it and sent my bank the scanned copy because I had learned the art of keeping receipts. Then came the group chat meltdown. Someone posted a photo of Rowan and me from the party, taken from just the wrong angle to be flattering, and said, "Who knew Lena had it in her?" The thread split into camps. Aunt Barbara said, "We don't air laundry." My cousin Mark wrote, "We do if someone wipes their hands on it." Someone else sent a gif of a dumpster rolling down a flooded street. My mother left the chat, a dramatic exit that fooled no one because she had coached the chat into existence. She called me. I pressed ignore. She called again. I texted. In a meeting, which was true. I was meeting myself for a discussion about whether I liked the person I was becoming. She left a voicemail. "I hope you're satisfied," she said, the words tight. "Your father is sick over this. Your aunt is beside herself. We will discuss boundaries next week." Boundaries? She said the word like it was a brand of cereal she'd just tried and thought was too crunchy. Tessa asked to meet for coffee. We sat on a bench near the river where the geese make their terrible sounds and the joggers pretend to ignore the geese. She brought a small envelope. "I can't fix it," she said, "but I will not be part of doing it to you. This is from me and Evan." I opened it. A check, again for $2,000. "Tess," I said. "You don't have to." "I know," she said. "I want to. Your mom told me she paid for the deposit after the hospital thing. I assumed she meant with her money, not yours." "That's on me for assuming." "We're trained to assume," I said, and we both laughed a little because otherwise we might start to cry and become those people crying on a bench while geese heckle them. "Are you okay?" she asked. "No," I said. "But I'm not this specific version of not okay anymore." She nodded. "I'm getting used to telling my mom no." She acts like I'm stabbing her, and then later she calls to ask if I need chicken soup. "I'm sorry," I said. We hugged. It was awkward because we don't hug much, but it was real. I put her check with the other check because the bank likes tidy stories even if families don't. My father had another appointment. He texted me, "Can you come?" And that old tug started at my sternum. Then I thought about boundaries. I thought about my back, my job, my life that was bigger than waiting rooms. I texted back, "I can't. Here are 3 car services that give discounts for medical appointments." He said, "Okay," and then, "I miss you," which opened a door in my chest and let in air I didn't recognize. Rowan and I started meeting with a couples counselor who sat with her legs crossed and nodded at the right places and asked questions like, "What does that word mean in your family?" and "What version of home are you building?" I told her my family is good at making a mess and then arguing about who left the broom in the wrong closet. Rowan told her he grew up in a quiet house that got too quiet after his dad left. We learned how to choose each other in small ways, like slightly overcooking eggs for the other person because they like them that way, even if you don't. Eli called me at midnight one Tuesday. I got declined for an apartment, he said, pissed like the credit score had insulted his masculinity. "Can I put you down as an emergency contact or something?" "Sure," I said. "And Eli, wrap your life up before you hand it to someone else." He laughed. "You love telling me how to live," he said. "No," I said, and kept my voice soft even though my shoulders had tensed. "I just love you, and don't want to carry it for you." He was quiet for a beat. "Copy," he said, and it sounded like a moment where a line on a page darkens and you can read it. My mother did not apologize. My mother called with weather reports disguised as questions. "Are you coming Sunday?" she'd ask. "Your father likes seeing you." "Are you bringing your friend?" she'd say sharp. "Rowan," I'd say. "His name is Rowan." "I know," she'd say, affronted that I would think she could forget. "I was testing you." "I'm not a test," I said once, and the silence on the line was almost a sound. My father sent tarot-sized apologies by text. "We messed up," he wrote once, late at night, maybe after the kind of thinking people only do alone. "I want to do better." I wrote back, Doing better starts with not letting mom call being held accountable betrayal. He responded with a thumbs up emoji because he is a man who learned his feelings in a world that wants men to communicate with pictures. In late August, Rowan took me to the hardware store because I still like the smell of sawdust even when it reminds me of things. He picked out cedar planks and built a small bench for my fire escape, a place for us to sit and drink coffee and watch the city pretend it's a quieter place in the morning. He sanded the edges so I wouldn't catch my thigh on a splinter. He stained the wood. He sat on the floor and watched it dry like it was a premiere. We took a night to talk about the ways we learned love. He said, "I thought love was being unnoticeable, so I didn't cause trouble." I said, "I thought love was being indispensable, so they couldn't get rid of me." We looked at each other and realized those are two people who could walk past each other quietly for years if they didn't keep calling each other by name. Autumn felt like a new room. My therapist asked, "What does peace look like for you right now?" And I said, "Having my phone on silent and not feeling like I'm missing a fire." She nodded. "What else?" she asked. I said, "Introducing Rowan to my father in a room without my mother."
So I did.
I met my father at a diner, the kind with vinyl booths that have seen some things. He sat on the bench across from me and fiddled with the sugar packets because he can't stand to have his hands free when he's about to say something that matters. "I'm sorry," he said. He didn't look at me when he said it, but he said it. "I tell jokes when I'm scared. Your mother gets louder when she's cornered. It's not your job to make us feel less like we're going to die when people see us ugly." "Thank you," I said. It sounded sincerely quiet, like I was talking to a small animal I didn't want to scare. "Bring him," he said. "Let me meet him without the fan club." Rowan arrived 10 minutes later. He shook my father's hand, and the two of them made small talk about tires and the price of coffee beans, and the way the city pretends to be different every year and mostly isn't. My father made jokes and Rowan smiled, and my father tried a different tactic. He said, "You love my daughter?" And the question hung there like a chandelier no one expected in a diner. "Yes," Rowan said. "And I will do it out loud." My father surprised me. He put his hands flat on the table and said, "Then please keep loving her out loud." He looked old in that moment, like the man who taught me to ride a bike and then got mad when I didn't stop at the invisible line he had drawn on the sidewalk. Her mother can't hear whispers. She only hears megaphones. We paid. We stood up. My father hugged me. It felt like hugging a piece of furniture that belonged to my family. He smelled like coffee, and that cologne he uses only when he is trying to prove he is still himself. "I am trying," he said into the top of my head. I said, "Good." The fallout from the party had burned through, and we were in the smoldering phase. People stopped asking me if I was going to apologize. They switched to telling me stories about themselves that involved boundaries they had never admitted to having. My cousin Mark confessed that he hadn't been to Aunt Barbara's in months because she makes him feel 12. Aunt Barbara told me, at a baby shower for someone else, that she was proud of me for not making her sort of mess. "It's more work to stay quiet," she said, which sounded like a confession disguised as a compliment. My mother avoided. When we did speak, she stayed in the lanes she understands best. Weather, work gossip, whether I'd seen the latest article about how to clean your coffee maker with vinegar. Once she slipped. "Your aunt thinks we went too far," she said, disdainful, like Aunt Renee had failed to hold the line. "You did," I said. She sighed like a woman who has just seen a stain on a dress 5 minutes before a photo. "We'll agree to disagree," she said. "I disagree with disagreement about facts," I said. "Nothing is ever simple with you," she said. "No," I said. "It can be." Tessa and I grew closer in the quiet way that makes you forget there was ever a gap. She'd send me a picture of a pair of shoes and ask, "Too much?" I'd ask her if she wanted to come see the leaves in the park with us, and she'd show up with travel mugs and a blanket even though the bench was wood and fine. At her wedding, months later, she asked me to stand up for her and say one nice thing into a microphone. I said, "Tessa forgives things that I would burn. She will be a good mother to whoever needs it." There was a pause in the room after that sentence, like everybody recognized the line and felt it land. We got engaged. Not then, Not at the diner, not at a party, but in my kitchen on a Thursday night when the pasta water was taking too long to boil and the window was fogging up from the steam, and Rowan held up the smallest ring, a slim band with a tiny diamond I had never described wanting, and asked, "Do you want to keep doing this with me?" I cried and hugged him and said yes, and then we forgot the pasta and ate cheese from the fridge in celebration. I told my father first. He cried in the quiet way men in my family cry, which is to look away and clear the throat and pretend an eyelash has gone rogue. He hugged Rowan like a man hugging a man he is not entirely comfortable with but would like to be. He said he was happy. He did not make a joke. It was a small miracle. I told my mother second. She looked at the ring and said nothing for a beat that lasted too long. Then she said, "Well, let me see it," and took my hand and rotated it like a jeweler. "Small," she said, and I recognized it, the meanness trying to slide back in and make itself at home. Then she caught herself. "It's elegant," she corrected quickly. "I suppose we should plan something small, given the circumstances."
"We are," I said.
"We're going to do it at the park with a handful of people. You're welcome to come." "Just a handful," she said, pained. "What will people think?" "They'll think we're starting our life the way we can afford," I said. She exhaled and tried another tack. "Can I at least throw you a shower?" she asked. "You can throw a brunch," I said. "With a maximum of 20 and no games." "Deal," she said, and she smiled. "You're bossy." "I am," I said. "It's one of my better qualities." Eli bought a used car. He didn't ask me to co-sign. He paid me back for the oil change he never paid me back for 7 years ago, a $20 bill folded into a card that said Happy Tuesday on the front. Inside he'd written, "I'm practicing being a brother and not a hurricane." I stuck the 20 to the inside of a book and kept the card on my fridge for a while. At work, I asked for a raise. I presented numbers like I was arguing a case to a judge. I got half of what I asked for, which was still more than I had, and I put that into a fund named More Than Enough because I like confusing the part of me that still expects crisis every time I open my banking app. We got a dishwasher. It made our fights quieter, because there is something about washing dishes by hand that makes my mother's voice appear in my head. The dishwasher hummed, and I thought about how small appliances can be miracles. What I learned is that families are weather. They change. They can be beautiful. They can ruin your plans. You can learn to carry an umbrella. You can accept that sometimes you get wet. You can also build a house with thicker walls and better windows. I learned that rumors are lazy. They are for people who want a story without having to pay for it. Truth is expensive. It costs your peace for a minute and then buys it back for the rest of your life. I learned that revenge doesn't feel like what you think it will. It isn't flipping a table or making your mother cry. It is living a life where when she calls, you can let it go to voicemail because you are folding laundry with someone who will help you put it away and will not use the shape of your underwear as a punchline. It's boring and it's holy in a way we aren't going to talk about, because I promised myself I would not give the sacred parts of my life the words my parents would use to ruin it. I learned that integrity looks like printing receipts and handing them to people and saying, "We're going to do this honestly," even when your hands shake. It looks like saying no to a person you love when you know your yes would become their excuse. I learned that courage is not a roar. It is a sentence. "I'm done disappearing." It is a hand slipping into mine and squeezing twice, once for you and once for me. It is a trip to a florist the day of a party you dread and buying yourself flowers because you want to hold something beautiful while people decide if they get to love you. I learned that boundaries make space for love to grow in the shape it is meant to, not the shape it was forced into. I learned that FoundFamily is not a consolation prize. It's the prize. It's brunch with friends who show up with a drill and a bottle of wine. It's a man in a navy suit who will stand in front of your parents and tell them the truth without raising his voice. It's your cousin implying, delicately, that she will not perpetuate a system that made sense only because silence co-signed it. On the morning of our wedding, I sat on the cedar bench Rowan made for the fire escape. The city was doing its morning impressions of peace. I held a bouquet that I bought for myself because I like the way flowers look when I pick them. I called my father. He didn't pick up. I left a message. "It's happening," I said. "It's small. It's perfect. I love you." I didn't call my mother. I texted, ceremony at 11, and turned my phone face down. Tessa showed up with a bag of bagels and the exact right color of lipstick. Friends drifted in the way family does, when you let it be family. We walked to the park. We said yes. The officiant said some nice words that did not involve anyone beyond us. Rowan slid the ring on my finger, and I looked at his face like I was trying to memorize it for when things get hard. They will. That is what life is. We kissed. People clapped. After, while everyone stood around drinking coffee out of paper cups and arguing about whether to go for pancakes or pho, I felt a hand slip into mine. I turned. It was my father. He looked small in my mother's absence. He kissed my cheek and said, "You did it." "We did it," I said, and I meant me and Rowan and also me and my father in that moment, making a bridge over a small river and meeting in the middle without anyone else's voice telling us where to stand. He handed me a card. "Don't open it now," he said. "It's not from your mother." I laughed, soft. He hugged Rowan. My mother sent a text later with a photo of her fingers poised above her keyboard and the words almost called, and it was the funniest thing she had ever sent me. We went for pancakes. The syrup made everything else easier. The people I loved the most in the world were at the table, the noise level perfect, the coffee imperfect in a way that makes it good. There was a bouquet on the table, because sometimes you need to hold something beautiful while you let everyone else catch up. I was not the child who could be patted silent anymore. I was a person who had chosen the shape of her life. I don't remember what song the DJ switched to after I left the drinks table at Tessa's engagement. I do remember my mother's face when Rowan said, "Please don't call me imaginary." It wasn't shock. It was a mirror. She was the one who couldn't believe what she was seeing. Some days I think about that lawn. Too green for its zip code, the maple leaves shivering under strings of lights. I think about the envelope in my hand and the bouquet in the other, and the way the two felt like the past and the future. The past is paperwork. The future has petals and thorns. And some nights, when the city is quiet and the dishwasher hums and Rowan falls asleep with his hand on my hip like he's telling me he's still here, I think about the long table at my aunt's and the way everyone looked at me as if I had brought a ghost to dinner. Maybe I did. I brought the version of me I used to tell stories about, and I let her leave. She walked across the grass and out the gate and didn't look back.